Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Tim Murphy. I live in Providence. I'm a member of Common Cause. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. President Lyndon Johnson used the term Great Society to describe how government can be a tool for advancement of the most good for most of its citizens, to provide an opportunity for the people. Like many in this room, I believe in the role of government in trying to achieve that. People in Rhode Island are as smart, honest, and as hardworking as any people anywhere, yet we continue to underachieve. At best, we've provided mediocre educational and employment opportunities for most of our citizens. Many of our children, brothers, sisters, and friends have moved away for opportunities elsewhere. I believe there are a number of...
Mr. Murphy, if you could keep your testimony, the purpose of this committee is to determine whether or not, or to produce a report on whether or not there should be a constitutional convention. If you could keep your testimony to that, I would greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To that end, I have 8 amendments that I would like to see edited, and I'll go through each of them in terms of the preamble relatively briefly. The first is legislative immunity, which is Article 6, Section 5. In the Rhode Island Constitution, it's much too broad. In the U.S. Constitution, there are exclusions for treason, felony, breach of the peace. Those should be added to our Constitution. Delegates should also propose to the voters that Article 6, Section 5 be made explicitly subordinate to Article 3, Section 8, which is the section on establishing the Ethics Commission. The second proposal is reinstating Ethics Commission jurisdiction in Article 3, Section 8 by similarly expressly describing its supremacy over any conflicting resolutions or amendments. Line item veto has been gone over a number of times, so I won't go into that, but I will mention that there are 44 states that currently have a line item veto, and therefore Rhode Island is quite a bit behind in this area. I think is a critical issue for separation of powers that should be considered. I have specific language for each of these resolutions that I can leave with the committee secretary. I won't go through them in detail in the interest of time. Suggestion 4, the jury trial. The section of the Constitution describes rights to a jury trial that could be considered broad and vague. Delegates should consider proposing to the voters whether the Constitution should guarantee a right to a trial by jury for criminal and civil matters, but allow exceptions for administrative matters such as fines imposed by the Ethics Commission, especially where other avenues exist, such as an administrative appeals process. Number 5, ban on moral obligation bonds in Article 3, Section 16. Delegates should put forth an amendment to the people that would limit the ability of the legislature to approve obligations of the taxpayers to debts that are not approved by the voters in a referendum. Number 6, voter initiative has already been described. 24 states currently have a form of, quote, direct democracy where voters can put items on the ballot either by petition, directly or indirectly. Delegates to the Constitutional Convention should consider an amendment that would allow legislative statute and or constitutional amendments to be made directly or indirectly by the people. Number 7, women's rights, equal pay for work, right to abortion, Article 1, Section 2. Delegates should consider whether women's rights are sufficiently guaranteed in the Rhode Island Constitution, since abortion is explicitly excluded as a right, and equal pay for work based on gender is not explicitly recognized as a form of discrimination. Although in Roe v. Wade, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the 14th Amendment ensured women's freedom of reproductive choice, that ruling could be overturned. Delegates should propose to the voters that the Constitution be modified so that women's freedom of reproductive choice is explicitly granted, and gender discrimination in the workplace should be prohibited. Number 8, equal access to voting, Article 2, Section 1. Rhode Island's voter identification law has the potential to disenfranchise lower income and minority voters and was enacted without any evidence of voter fraud and is therefore unnecessary. Furthermore, there have been examples where polling places were inadequate in lower income neighborhoods and sometimes were closed with many voters still waiting in line to vote. The delegates to the convention should propose to the voters equal access to the polling places to be ensured throughout the state. And those are the 8 amendments, and as I said, I can submit the specific language. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murphy. And if you want to give a copy of that to the council, we'll make sure it becomes part of the record. Are there any questions for Mr. Murphy?